The system adapts. The alarm will ring in 3 minutes. I know this. The red digits on the clock face are a familiar glow in the otherwise total darkness of the room. My body, however, has already decided it's time. It's a silent internal alarm, more reliable than any machine. I swing my legs over the side of the bed, the floorboards cold against the soles of my feet. The room hasn't changed in years. The same stack of books on the nightstand, the same pattern of cracks on the ceiling, the same single window looking out onto the same silent street. I move through the space without needing to see. A well-rehearsed dance of muscle memory. Dressing is automatic. The same gray trousers, the same white shirt, the same dark jacket. Each item is in its designated place, a small island of order in the quiet pre-dawn. Downstairs, the kitchen is just as predictable. I don't turn on the light. My hand finds the coffee maker, the filter, the scoop. The process is a ritual, performed with the precision born of countless repetitions. The gurgle of the coffee machine is the first real sound of the day, a signal that the system is beginning its cycle once more. I stand by the window, sipping the black coffee, watching the first hints of gray light seep into the sky. The world outside is still asleep, or so it seems. But I know that, like me, other components of the system are stirring, preparing for the day's operations. There is no anticipation, no dread. There is only the quiet certainty of what is to come. The walk to work is a straight line, a vector connecting my home to my destination. It's a path I've walked thousands of times, a groove worn into the fabric of the city. My pace is steady, consistent, a metronome ticking off the seconds of my commute. The street is quiet at this hour. The same bakery with its lights off, the same newspaper stand still shuttered. Even the pigeons seem to follow a script, scattering in the same pattern each morning as I approach. At the corner of Elm and 4th, he's always there, the man waiting for the 6:15 bus. He never looks at me, and I never look at him, but his presence is a fixed point, a landmark on my daily map. Our silent, shared moment is part of the route. The pavement beneath my feet is a tapestry of cracks and patches, each one as familiar as the lines on my own hand. I could walk this path with my eyes closed, my body navigating my feel by the subtle shifts in texture and incline. Last Tuesday, there was a brief anomaly. A delivery truck was parked, blocking the sidewalk. I had to step into the street, a deviation of maybe 3 feet. For a moment, the rhythm was broken. The man at the bus stop looked up, a flicker of surprise in his eyes. It was a silent acknowledgement, a shared recognition of the unexpected. The disruption lasted only seconds, but the memory of it lingered, a tiny error in the code. I returned to the pavement, the familiar rhythm reasserting itself, but something had been noted. A variable had been introduced. The system had registered the change. Today, something is different. As I approach the corner of Elm and 4th, a new impulse surfaces. It's not a thought, not a conscious decision, but a physical pull, a subtle shift in my own internal navigation. The man is there, waiting for his bus, a constant in a world on the verge of change. My eyes meet his for a fraction of a second. There's no recognition, no communication. It's just an observation, a data point. My legs keep moving, maintaining their steady pace. But instead of continuing straight, my body makes a choice. With a precision that feels both alien and entirely natural, I make a sharp right turn. I pivot onto a side street I have never taken before. It's narrower, the cobblestones older, the buildings leaning in closer. The air feels different here, thicker, carrying the scent of damp brick and history. My body doesn't hesitate. There is no stumble, no awkward adjustment. My stride adapts seamlessly to the uneven ground. It feels as though this new path was always the intended one, as if the thousands of previous journeys were merely a preparation for this single decisive turn. The old route, with its familiar landmarks and predictable rhythm, evaporates from my mind. It's an archived file, A deleted memory. This new street unspools before me, a fresh line of code being written in real time. My heart rate doesn't increase. My breathing remains steady. I am simply executing a new command, my entire being recalibrating to this altered reality. This is not rebellion. This is an update. I arrive at the office building. The glass doors slide open with a familiar hiss. Inside, the system hums along. Keyboards click in a soft, percussive rhythm. The fluorescent lights cast a sterile, even glow over everything. People move through the corridors like clockwork, their paths intersecting without collision. I take my place at my station. The screen flickers to life, displaying columns of data, endless streams of information. Throughout the day, I notice the small errors, the tiny deviations. A file misplaced, a number transposed, a communication delayed by a few milliseconds. In the past, these would have been flagged, corrected, the system restored to its perfect state. But today, no one seems to notice. Or if they do, they don't act. The errors are absorbed, integrated. The system adapts, finding new pathways around the imperfections, creating a new kind of order. The day ends. I stand on the pavement outside, back where my new journey began this morning. The crosswalk signal is red. I wait. The light is taking longer than usual to change. It's a small delay, a minor glitch in the city's programming. But I don't feel impatient. I just stand there, watching the traffic flow, a part of the new, adapted reality. The signal flickers, hesitates, and then finally turns green. I step off the curb, my path now permanently altered, and walk into the evening. The system continues to run, and I am a seamless functioning part of it. A new part. Thanks for watching. If this story resonated with you, consider subscribing for more content like this. The orchard held. Morning sat low over the orchard. The ground still held the cold from the night. She moved between the trees without haste, the grass brushing her boots. The apple trunks leaned the way they always had, moss clinging to one side only. Her hand went to a branch, and the shears followed. The blade closed. Bark flakes fell near her feet. She stepped past them. She poured coffee from the thermos and drank it standing. It was already thin and cool. A truck passed somewhere beyond the fence. The sound stretched and dull. She smoked half a cigarette and pressed it out on rock. The smoke did not linger. One tree carried blossoms unevenly white-crowded at the ends, bare wood between. She stood there longer than needed, the shears resting against her leg, her fingers loose around the handle. Later, she sat on the folded crate near the edge of the orchard. The light had shifted, touching the ground between the roots. A few petals lay where the wind had dropped them. She stayed where she was, hands on her knees, until the quiet returned. The next day came the same way. She arrived with the crate under her arm and set it down where it had been before. The orchard held its shape. Nothing had shifted overnight. She took the gloves from her pocket and pulled them on slowly, smoothing the loose fabric over her fingers. One tear at the seam widened. She worked along the inner row. The shears caught once on a knot, and she twisted her wrist to free them. Sap clung to the blade. She left it there. A bird lifted from the grass and was gone. She cut a branch that leaned too close to the ground. The pause lasted. Her wrist held. She set the shears against her leg and did not raise them again. When the coffee was gone, she left the thermos open on the crate and sat beside it. Wind moved through the trees without reaching her. Somewhere beyond the orchard, a gate closed. She stayed until the light dulled, then gathered her things, leaving the shears where they were. By midday the air had warmed, but the ground kept its cool. She came later than usual, and noticed it only when the light already stood high between the trees. The crate scraped once as she set it down. One apple tree near the fence had begun to flower unevenly since yesterday. A few blossoms had opened. Others stayed tight, dark at the tips. She reached for the shears and stopped. The branch was thin. Her hand remained suspended, the metal resting against bark. The fence clicked once in the wind. She lowered her hand and let the branch be. The decision made no sound. Rain came without warning, light at first, then steady enough to darken the soil. She did not leave when it began. The crate grew damp beneath her, the wood drawing water in slow lines. She stood and moved to the outer row, where the trees were older and spaced farther apart. Their branches hung lower, heavy even before the rain. She chose one and cut. The blade went through cleanly. The branch fell and did not bounce. Water ran along the fresh surface of the wood. Her hands were wet now. She wiped them on her jacket. When the rain thinned, she gathered nothing. The branch lay where it had fallen, pale against the dark ground. She stepped around it on her way out. The evening light came shallow, sliding between the trees instead of falling on them. She arrived without the crate and stood for a moment at the edge of the orchard. Nothing waited for her. Some of the apple trees were in bloom now. Not all. White showed in patches, uneven, indifferent to what she had done and to what she had left undone. She walked among them without tools, her hands empty. She sat on the ground where the soil was dry and leaned back against a trunk. The bark pressed through her jacket. The air carried the faint smell of blossoms, already passing. She watched the light leave the fence. She remained. The message she didn't send. When the message arrived, it looked like the others. A subject line without punctuation, a timestamp that felt arbitrary, her name spelled correctly. Jonas read it once and then again, not because it was hard to understand, but because reading kept his hands busy. He was at the table by the kitchen window, the one bought secondhand that never quite stopped wobbling. The afternoon light was thin. The radiator clicked, then settled. He could have shifted the table leg with his foot, but he didn't. He let the wobble remain, the way he let dust gather in the corner behind the plant he didn't water often enough. The message was short. She wrote that she had some things of his in a box, that she would be in his neighborhood on Thursday, and that she could leave it with the concierge if he preferred. She added, lightly, that she hoped he was well. He noticed the way she offered the concierge, as if it were the most natural option. It wasn't cruel. It was efficient. He imagined her typing it while standing somewhere. He imagined a small pause before, if he preferred, because she would have known he might not. Jonas hovered his cursor over the reply button and didn't click. The laptop fan was on, even though the room was cold. He could hear the elevator in the building across the courtyard, a low hum followed by a soft stop. The courtyard itself was nearly empty. A bicycle leaned against the wall where someone had left it. The front wheel turned slightly, as if it had been set down in a hurry and forgotten. He had expected, for weeks, that something like this would happen. Not a box, not Thursday, but a line of contact that made it possible to pretend nothing was being asked. He remembered how earlier he had told himself he would not do that kind of pretending. At the time it had felt firm, like a decision. He couldn't locate it now in his body. It was only a record, like a note in a file. The message asked for preference. It offered a polite path that required no meeting, no voice, no face. He found himself leaning toward it, the way he leaned toward any default. He told himself it was reasonable. He told himself he was busy. He told himself she might be relieved. He looked at the calendar tab. Thursday had a client call at 11 and an internal meeting at 3. The rest of the day was white space with small gray lines. He could rearrange things. He could walk to her street, meet her by the bakery where she used to buy bread. He could arrive early and wait. He could also stay home and let the concierge sign for the box and bring it up later. He considered the box itself. He didn't know what would be in it. A sweater he'd left in her closet, a charger, maybe the small notebook he kept in the drawer by her couch. He tried to remember what he had written in it. He could picture the cover black, slightly bent at the corners, but not the pages. He thought of other objects, too. The spare tea he'd given her, which she might return. A postcard from a city they never visited that had sat on her refrigerator for months without being read. He watched his mind arrange these items as if taking inventory could substitute for answering. The cursor on the screen blinked steadily, unbothered. He thought of her adding, "Hope you are well," because it was what people did. He also thought of her not adding anything more. "No, we should talk. No, I miss you. No complaint. No accusation." He felt a small gratitude for that restraint, and then noticed how quickly he turned it into a reason to do nothing. His phone buzzed with a notification from work. A colleague asked if he could review a deck by end of day. Jonas read it, replied with a simple yes, and set the phone down. The ease of that exchange made the other message feel heavier, not because it asked more, but because it asked for choice. He clicked into the reply window for her email. The blank field sat there, waiting. He typed hi and stopped. He deleted it. He typed hello, which looked too formal, and left it anyway for a moment. He added her name. He removed her name. He wrote Thursday works, then realized she hadn't asked to meet, only to drop off. He wrote concierge is fine, and stared at the sentence until the letters stopped looking like letters. He noticed how the sentence solved the problem without touching the problem. It was clean. It would land on her side as something she could comply with. It would let her move through Thursday without making room for him. There would be a box, an exchange of items, and then nothing. He remembered a winter evening, not long ago, when they had stood in her hallway with their coats on. He had said he should go. She had nodded and said okay. He had stepped toward the door, stopped, and then asked if she needed anything from the store. She had smiled faintly and said no, thank you. He had left anyway. Later, he told himself it was considerate to ask. He had also known it wasn't what she needed. The memory came with details that had been unimportant at the time. The way her scarf was looped once around her neck. The way she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear with a gloved finger. The hall light had been too bright. He had noticed the neighbor's door across from hers, the scuffed paint near the handle. He had noticed the silence between them, but treated it like weather. Now, in his kitchen, he felt the same impulse to offer something safe. A concierge. A neutral exchange. It would be almost kind. He got up to make tea. The kettle took longer than he expected to begin its low rise toward boiling. He rinsed a mug and held it under the tap, watching the water flash and then steady. He chose the plain black tea because it required no decision beyond that. He stood by the counter and listened to the kettle. While he waited, he looked at the small scratch in the laminate near the sink. When the kettle clicked off, he poured the water and watched the bag darken the cup from the bottom up. He didn't add milk. He carried the mug back to the table and set it near the laptop, careful not to spill. The tea smelled faintly of paper. The reply window was still open. The tea smelled faintly of paper. The reply window was still open. Hello sat alone in it, like an unfinished letter. Jonas took a sip and then, because the tea was hot, held it in his mouth a second longer than usual. The heat moved through him in a way he noticed without attaching words to it. He considered calling her instead. He pictured the phone ringing on her side, her glancing at the screen, seeing his name. He imagined his own voice, sounding controlled. He imagined the conversation ending in under 2 minutes, with both of them polite. He knew that even this imagined call was a plan to avoid something. He also knew he would accept the avoidance as long as it came wrapped in civility. He opened the building's concierge app, the one used for deliveries and notices. There was a feature to authorize someone to leave a package. He scrolled through it, reading the options. He could set a time window. He could add a note. He could designate a pickup code. The interface was smooth, designed to remove friction. He returned to the email and typed a full sentence. "Concierge is fine. Thank you." He added, "Hope you are well too." He read that line twice. It sounded like something he would write to a former coworker. He left it. He could also write something else. He could write, "I can meet you." He could write, "Are you free for a coffee?" He could write, "I've been meaning to talk." He could write an apology with specifics. He could ask what she meant on the last day when she said she didn't know how to keep doing this. He could tell her he had noticed and still acted as if noticing were enough. He didn't write those things. He watched the cursor blink after 2, as if waiting for him to add the more difficult sentence. His tea cooled in slow increments. The radiator clicked again, then went quiet. He thought about Thursday again, the actual day. It wasn't far away. He thought about Thursday again, the actual day. It wasn't far away. He could decide now and still change his mind later. He could write, "Concierge is fine," and then show up anyway, stand in the lobby and wait. He could keep the politeness and still put himself in the path of something. He pictured the lobby of his building, the glass doors, the mat that always looked damp, the smell of floor cleaner. He pictured her stepping in, her hair tucked into her coat, the box held against her side. He pictured himself standing by the mailboxes, hands in his pockets, turning as if surprised. He pictured her face settling into a neutral expression. He pictured her saying hello, and him answering in the same tone, and the concierge watching from behind the desk. The picture didn't move past that. It stayed in the moment before anything important, held there by his own caution. He noticed that he preferred it that way, suspended, manageable. He didn't add that he also didn't want to know. His colleague sent another message, a follow-up about the deck. Jonas responded quickly, with a thumbs-up emoji. The simplicity of it sat strangely alongside the email he hadn't sent. He looked at the clock in the corner of the screen. The numbers changed. He moved the mouse to the send button. His hand paused. He could still erase the reply and start over. He could still write the other sentence. He clicked away from the email to the client deck and began to scroll through slides, making small edits, aligning headings, adjusting a bullet point, changing a numbers formatting. Each change was minor, each one correct. The work absorbed him in a narrow way. He liked that it had rules. When he returned to the email tab, the reply was still there, unsent. The cursor blinked at the end, patient. He read her message again, then his own draft. He thought of her receiving it, reading it once, and moving on. He thought of the box being left with the concierge, of him signing for it later, of carrying it upstairs and setting it on the table by the window. He saved the deck. He sat back. He placed his fingers on the keyboard, ready to do one thing or the other. He could press send. He could delete the reply and ask to meet. He closed the laptop lid instead and left the email where it was, unsent, the other sentence still untyped. The man who measured time. The stairs inside the tower are narrow and turn too often. The metal rail is cold. He pauses after the first flight, then the second. The air smells of dust and old oil. Somewhere above, the clock ticks unevenly. He checks the time on his phone. The screen lights his face for a moment, then goes dark again. He puts it back in his pocket and continues upward. At the top, the room opens just enough to stand. Gears fill the walls, thick teeth. The clock face is hidden behind him, its weight carried inward. He sets his bag down carefully, as if the floor might give way. The clock is slow. He loosens a bolt. It resists, then gives. The sound echoes longer than it should. His hands know where to go, even when his eyes don't. The metal leaves a taste at the back of his throat. Outside, the town is quiet. The factory down the road closed last winter. The sign is still up. The letters are fading unevenly. Later, he sits in the cafe across the street. The waitress brings coffee without asking. It is too hot. He wraps both hands around the cup and waits. The clock tower is visible between parked cars. The coffee cools. He takes a sip and sets the cup down again. Outside, a delivery truck passes without slowing. He returns to the tower in the afternoon. The light inside has shifted. Dust floats where the sun reaches. Still slow. He adjusts it again, more gently. He thinks briefly of other towers, other towns. A time when people waited for bells to tell them where they were in the day. The thought slips away. By evening, rain starts. It drums against the metal roof and runs down the stone walls. The sound fills the space until there is nothing else. He sits on the floor with his back against the wall and listens. The clock falters once, then stops. He does not move. The rain keeps time well enough on its own. Eventually, the clock starts again. Slower now. Uneven. He reaches up and makes a small adjustment. He leaves the tower as the rain thins. The streetlights flicker on. The town remains the same. The next morning, the clock is running. People walk beneath it without noticing. Cars pass. A child waits for the school bus. The hands move forward, slightly off but steady. He sits on the tower steps. The sun hits the clock face for a moment, bright enough to erase the numbers. Then it shifts. He finishes his cigarette, stands, and picks up his bag. Time moved on. He was already gone. The half-light calculus. The room has one window. The blind is halfway down. Dust floats in the narrow light, a paused snowfall. The clock above the door has stopped, the second hand fixed between numbers. Now is not then is not earlier. The chair across from me keeps its angle, legs planted, seat empty. The table's edge presses a pale line into my forearms. It fades when I shift my weight. The radiator ticks without heat. Count the ticks, even when they don't come. The smell is old paper and something metallic. It remains unnamed. The walls have a stain shaped like a continent I've never been to. A jump. The room again. Same light. The clock still. My hands lie flat on the table. Nails trimmed too short. There's a thin cut on my thumb. It stings when I press it. The sound of a door earlier. Or maybe later. The hinge's complaint still rings in the ears. The door is closed now. The handle catches the light the same way. The hands do not move toward it. A shift. The chair across from me is still empty. The space between us is set by the table. The eye traces the grain, a dark swirl, like a fingerprint. Like someone pressed their whole identity into the wood and left. Breathing breaks the quiet, dot in, dot out, dot the quiet returns, heavier. The jaw tightens without a nameable reason. Teeth press. The pressure stays inside the skull. The picture frame on the wall has a crack in the glass. It always has. The photo behind it is of a place that doesn't matter. The crack is a thin white line. It doesn't move. Nothing here moves except the dust. Again, the watch shows a different time than before. Don't adjust it. The face reflects the blind, the halfway line cutting the numbers in two. The strap presses into the wrist, leaving a red mark. This tightness is proof of something. Words rose earlier like heat under skin, urgent and clear. They tried to leave through the mouth. They settled back down instead. Their weight sits in the chest, unspoken, carefully arranged. They stack like books on a shelf that cannot be touched, lest they all fall. The stain on the wall has a darker edge now. Or it was always there, forgotten. Memory works like that here. A break. The light is thinner. The blind hasn't moved. The dust continues its slow, identical fall through the shaft of afternoon. The table has a small notch on the corner. Count it once. Then again, to be sure it's real. Fingers curl under the edge. The wood is smooth, worn by other hands, or these hands, or no one's. Maybe I am the first person to sit here. Maybe the 100th. There was a moment somewhere between these moments when standing up was possible. The image stays separate, like a photograph of someone else. In this room, the body remains. The clock's second hand remains fixed between numbers. Another jump. The taste of something bitter at the back of the mouth. Old coffee or fear. Swallow. The taste lingers. The radiator clicks once, a small promise of heat, then nothing. Count to 10 anyway, waiting for the next one. A voice could fill that empty chair. A specific voice. Instead, the absence has a shape, a presence made of missing. My foot taps the floor where the voice should be. The wood is cool through the sock. The sentence was ready earlier. It was precise. It fit its moment perfectly. The moment passed and took the sentence with it, but the shape remains in the throat. A shift. The window shows less sky now. Or more. The blind keeps its halfway promise. The outside doesn't enter. The inside doesn't leave. Suspended. Shoulders hold themselves up without permission. A familiar tightness between the blades, old as childhood. Let it stay. Fighting it takes more energy than is available. The silence has layers now. One thin as paper. One thick as wool. I sit between them. The chair across waits with infinite patience. The crack in the picture frame glints a road leading somewhere I cannot follow. Again, the foot has fallen asleep. Pins and needles bloom up the calf and fade slowly. Don't move it. The numbness is welcome. Hands slamming on the table, the sound, the shock, the relief of impact. The image flashes, but the table remains unmarked. The thought dissolves like sugar in water. The clock remains wrong. The watch ticks against the pulse. Time fractures into pieces and scatters across the floor like broken glass. Inhale slowly. Hold. Count to 4. Release. The room accepts the air back without judgment. A break in time. The light is the same tired gold. The dust is the same patient fall. The chair is the same perfect emptiness. The anger sits where it has been sitting all along, compacted, unnamed, patient as stone. The exact second when speaking would have mattered is gone. A small second, easily missed if you blink. It sits there still, inert as the stopped hand of the clock, waiting for nothing. The table edge presses into the forearms. A pale line appears. It will fade. The door stays closed. The handle shines. Don't reach for it. Not yet. Maybe not ever. The room holds. The blind holds its position. The dust holds its course. The chair holds its emptiness like a question that doesn't need answering. Thinking becomes just another piece of furniture, solid, immovable, gathering dust. The air is thicker, pressing against the skin. The throat tightens around nothing. Swallow. The anger sits. The silence layers. The time scatters. Sit. Observe. Do not speak. The gray exit. The corridor lights clicked on at 6 o'clock. The same dry sound they always made. Sundays didn't count for anything here. The linoleum, worn into pale tracks by years of shoes and carts, caught the fluorescent glare and threw it back. At the far end, the vending machine buzzed behind its scratched plastic face. A few slots still empty, just as they'd been for months. Mara arrived at 6:07. She hung her coat on the second hook from the left. The first still leaned outward at a slight angle. The hooks were bolted into a strip of varnished wood, split by a long seam, like an old scar no one bothered to fix. Her shoes squeaked softly as she crossed into the staff room. The air smelled of instant coffee layered over disinfectant. She washed her hands at the sink. The faucet rattled if she turned it too far. The paper towels tore sooner than she expected. She filled the kettle and set it on its base. A chalky white ring of limescale clung to the bottom. Above the counter, a laminated schedule sagged at one corner, names written over and over again in thick marker. At 6:10, the kettle clicked off. She poured the water into a mug with a chipped rim and stirred. The spoon struck the ceramic with a dull tap. She set the mug on a napkin already marked with old coffee rings. At 6:15, she pulled the binder from the shelf. The cloudy plastic cover creaked as it opened. The checklist inside had been photocopied too many times. The letters were fuzzy now, their edges soft and tired. She checked the first box with the pen chained to the clipboard. The chain made a small metallic sound. At 6:22, she went to the storage closet. The door stuck, then gave way. Inside were towels, wipes, boxes of gloves. She counted the gloves, slid one box forward, nudged a half-open pack back onto the second shelf, then shut the door with a firmer push than necessary. The first bell rang at 6:31. It was gentle, not urgent. Mara headed toward the receiving room, passing doors with narrow windows, clouded by years of poor cleaning. Behind one of them, a television flashed blue, silent. The bulletin board outside receiving was crowded. Safety notices, a hand-washing chart, a faded flyer for a staff potluck from last spring. Someone had pinned up a photo of a dog wearing a hat. Mara pushed into the receiving room. The smell was paper and plastic, with something faintly sour underneath. On the desk sat a stamp pad, stacks of forms, and a calendar turned to the wrong month. The clock above the door ran 2 minutes fast. Everyone followed it anyway. Rita sat with her elbows on the desk, phone wedged between shoulder and ear. Her mouth moved in short bursts while she stared at the screen. Beside her, a notebook lay open, block letters filling the page, dates underlined hard enough to leave grooves. She hung up and spoke to Mara in the same clipped tone she used with delivery drivers. The agency had confirmed the midday arrival. Paperwork would be standard. The director wanted everyone present. It wouldn't look good if someone disappeared. Mara nodded once. She opened the top drawer, took out the stamp, and tested it. The imprint came out thin at the corners. At 6:44, Thomas came in carrying a tray of coffees. He set it down and handed them out without asking who wanted what. He mentioned the overnight log. The corridor camera by the back door had frozen again at 3:12. He left Mara's cup near her elbow and kept moving. She lifted the cup, then set it back down. The lid didn't sit right. Coffee crept outward, forming a thin ring on the desk. At 7 o'clock, she took the clipboard and walked the corridor. The rooms all looked the same, with small, forgettable differences. Each door carried the same sign: keep closed, keep quiet. On one, quiet had been scratched out and written again in pen. In room 3, she pulled the curtain back. Someone lay under a thin blanket, turned toward the wall. She checked the bracelet against the chart and moved on. In room 4, a paper cup sat on the floor. She picked it up and dropped it into the bin at the nurse station. The lid hesitated, then snapped shut. At 7:18, she checked another box. The pen died halfway through the mark. She scribbled in the margin until the ink came back. At 8:05, the director passed through in his charcoal suit. He didn't enter, just turned his head enough to catch their eyes. His hand lifted slightly. Rita straightened. He kept walking. At 8:12, Rita said everyone was staying until after the arrival. The agency was sensitive about timing. Mara signed her name under on duty. The logbook's spine was cracked and stiff. At 8:37, she stood by the window near the back stairwell. Outside, frost coated the parked cars. The dented delivery vans sat by the dumpsters. Nothing moved. At 8:40, Thomas came up behind her with a folder. The camera needed a service request. The repair form needed the director's signature. Someone had complained about missing items from room 6. There would be questions. Mara turned just enough to look at the folder. She set it on the ledge beneath the window, on top of outdated pamphlets about visiting hours. Thomas talked about discretion, said silence didn't help anyone. Mara nodded. She stayed where she was, her reflection faint in the glass. Thomas waited, then left. At 9:03, she carried the folder back to the staff room and lined it up carefully with the edge of the table beside a bowl of mints. At 9:07, she opened her locker. A faded cartoon sun was stuck to the inside of the door. Inside were a folded sweater, extra shoelaces, and a small paper envelope tucked into the back corner. She held the envelope for a count of 3, then put it back and shut the door. It rattled once. At 9:22, she checked the clocks at the nurse station. None of them agreed. At 9:30, the corridor filled briefly with footsteps. A cart stacked with folded sheets rolled past. Someone laughed once. At 9:41, Mara stood with Rita and Thomas in the receiving room. Rita drummed her fingers on the desk. Thomas set his phone face down. The printer warmed up. The calendar was still wrong. Rita said there'd be a 20-minute delay and pointed at the checklist. Mara drew a line through a box that had already been checked. At 10:02, Thomas mentioned the missing items again, tapping a paragraph in the overnight log. It would be worse if it came up later. Rita glanced toward Mara's coat on the hook. Mara straightened it, rinsed the stamp, and wiped it on a paper towel until the towel turned gray. At 10:18, she left the receiving room and headed for the back stairwell. The corridor looked exactly as it had before. The exit sign glowed above the door. A notice on the glass-reed door alarmed. She signed the smoke log without taking a cigarette, pressed the bar, and stepped out into the cold. The door closed behind her. The concrete outside was damp. Frost clung to pallets stacked near the dumpsters. She crossed the lot in a straight line. At the chain barrier, she lifted it, stepped over, and let it drop. The back door stayed shut. Inside, the arrival would still be late. The checklist would still be there. She followed the gravel strip along the fence. The warning signs repeated. So did the fence posts. At the corner, a bus stop waited across the street. The bench was wet. No cars passed. The bus arrived late. Its doors snapped open and shut too quickly. Mara climbed aboard and dropped coins into the tray. She took the second seat on the right. The vinyl stuck slightly to her coat. The bus smelled of damp cloth and old heat. An ad above the window promised dental implants. The bus stopped where no one was waiting. The lights flickered once. Mara kept her hands folded in her lap. She didn't reach for her wallet. A man boarded with grocery bags. Later, an older woman with a folded umbrella sat across from her. Mara got off where the sidewalk was cracked. The bus pulled away. She passed a closed kiosk and a poster advertising a concert that had already happened. At a crosswalk, the green figure blinked almost immediately. She turned onto a street of identical apartment blocks. A barber pole spawned in an empty shop. She paused beside a wall where old graffiti showed through fresh paint. Someone stepped out with a dog. The leash went tight, then slack. Mara kept walking. She passed a bakery, trays visible through the window. The bell rang twice. She didn't go in. At the end of the street, a narrow alley cut between the buildings. Leaves clogged the drain. She stopped there. A bubble surfaced and burst. A bottle cap floated, spinning slowly, catching the light for just a second.